Have you ever caught yourself thinking about death, only to push the thought away? It's strange, isn't it? The very thing we fear most, death, seems too terrifying to fully contemplate. But what if embracing the idea of death could change how we live? Today, we're going to dive deep into the weird things that begin to happen when you start thinking about death. Not in a morbid way, but in a way that helps us understand life more clearly. From the moment we're born, death waits somewhere in the distance. It's the one thing that unites us all. Yet it's also the one thing we spend our lives avoiding. For many of us, thinking about death creates an unsettling, existential discomfort. After all, how can we make sense of something so final, so absolute, when it's beyond our ability to experience? As the ancient philosopher Epicurus said, death is nothing to us, because as long as we exist, death is not present. And when death arrives, we are no longer here. This quote may seem comforting on the surface, but it presents a paradox that goes much deeper. How can something so unknown, something we can never experience, hold such power over us? I remember the first time I truly thought about death. I was a teenager, and someone I knew had just passed away. At first, I was struck with sadness, but that soon gave way to something else, a kind of curiosity, mixed with fear. I started to wonder, what happens when we die? Is it just nothingness? Or is there something more? The thought consumed me for weeks, and I found myself spiraling into a kind of existential crisis. But as unsettling as these thoughts were, they also sparked something profound in me. I began to realize that thinking about death didn't just make me more afraid. It made me more aware of the present moment, more mindful of how I spent my time. Suddenly, life felt more precious, more urgent. When we think about death, what are we really thinking about? Is it the loss of our loved ones, our possessions, or our experiences? Or is it the loss of something even more profound, the very ability to think, feel, and be aware? As humans, we are wired to understand things through our subjective experiences. But death is the ultimate unknown. It's beyond experience, beyond thought. Philosopher Eugene Thacker once said, "Death is not just an event. It is the limit of thought itself." In his book In the Dust of This Planet, he explores how human thinking reaches its limits when confronted with death. It's not just that we don't know what happens after we die. We can't know. Our minds simply aren't equipped to grasp the idea of absolute nothingness. This is why death is often described as a doorway that we can never fully open. We know it's there. We see it from a distance, but we can never step through it and look inside. This unknowability creates an unsettling paradox. How can we fear something we can't understand? I think this fear of the unknown is what drives so many of our anxieties about death. I remember once having a conversation with a friend who had survived a near-death experience. He told me that the scariest part wasn't the thought of dying, but the uncertainty, not knowing what was on the other side. Was it eternal nothingness? A new beginning? Or something entirely incomprehensible? That uncertainty haunted him long after he recovered. But here's the thing, living with that uncertainty isn't necessarily a bad thing. In fact, it's one of the most human experiences we can have. Death is the ultimate unknown, and in facing it, we're forced to confront our own limitations. We realize that some things in life can't be answered with certainty, and that's okay. For centuries, humanity has tried to paint over this uncertainty with comforting images. Religions and philosophies have provided us with ideas of heaven, reincarnation, or eternal peace. These concepts give us something to hold on to in the face of the unknown. But as comforting as these ideas may be, they are ultimately theories, stories we tell ourselves to make sense of something that is, by nature, incomprehensible. Even today, with all our advances in science and technology, we are no closer to understanding the true nature of death. The mind, consciousness, and the essence of who we are remain elusive. Slipping through the cracks of scientific study, we can theorize, but we can never truly know. Take for instance the Stoics, who believed that death was simply part of the natural order. They viewed it as an inevitable transition, not something to be feared but accepted. In fact, the Stoic philosopher Seneca once said, "He who fears death will never do anything worthy of a living man." For the Stoics, contemplating death wasn't a morbid obsession, but a way to live more fully, with purpose and clarity. But even this philosophical approach doesn't fully resolve the paradox of death. No matter how much we philosophize about it, death remains a mystery, and perhaps that's what makes it so powerful. It forces us to confront the limits of our knowledge and our ability to control our fate. In many ways, death is what gives life its meaning. Without the knowledge that our time here is limited, would we truly value the moments we have? Would we strive to live fully, to love deeply, or to achieve greatness? Death reminds us that life is finite, and in that finiteness, we find purpose. But here's an interesting twist. While death may give life meaning, it also challenges our very notions of meaning. If everything we know and feel is tied to our physical existence, and if that existence ends when we die, what does that say about the meaning we create? Are we just living out a brief flash of consciousness in an otherwise indifferent universe? I often find myself thinking about this, especially in moments of quiet reflection. If life is so brief, what's the point? Is it to accumulate experiences, to make a mark on the world, or simply to enjoy the ride? For me, the answer is a bit of all three. I've come to see death not as something to fear, but as a reminder to live fully, to find joy in the present moment, to love fiercely, and to leave behind something meaningful, even if it's just the memory of kindness or a shared laugh. In the end, death is a paradox that we may never resolve. It's something we can think about, but never truly know. And maybe that's okay. Maybe the purpose of contemplating death isn't to find answers, but to appreciate the mystery, to find humility in the face of the unknown, and to live with greater purpose and presence. As the author, J.J. Voe wrote, "The mystery of life is not a problem to be solved, but a reality to be experienced." In the same way, the paradox of death is not something to be feared or solved. It's a reality that, while unsettling, can also be a source of awe, wonder, and deep meaning. And maybe that's the most profound lesson death can teach us.